Hello everybody! Today we're going to be talking about the scariest books ever written according to you guys. This video has been a long time coming. A couple of months ago I asked on TikTok and on YouTube Shorts what the scariest book you guys had ever read was. That video did pretty good. It got over 36,000 views on TikTok and over 350 comments. So I have read through all of those and I have picked out the books that were mentioned the most. As always, please check content warnings before diving into any of these books. There are 10 of them in total, so let's get started. The first book, and one that I read very recently off the back of that video, is Dark Matter by Michelle Paver. Dark Matter is set in 1937 about 28-year-old Jack, who is poor and desperate to change his life, and he actually gets the opportunity to join an Arctic expedition where they will spend a year camping in an uninhabited bay. But soon after they arrive, the polar night is creeping in and Jack is forced to decide if he's going to stay by himself or leave with some of his campmates, because it turns out that their camp is actually not uninhabited and there is something dark waiting out in the wilderness. I finished this book a few weeks ago and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was quite a slow burn, but it is very atmospheric and I absolutely loved the Arctic setting. I can't recall ever reading a horror book like this before. It's set out as journal entries and each one's quite short, so it felt like every time I finished a chapter I just wanted to read the next one. And I can 100% see why this is one of the scariest books people have read. There were some really creepy elements in here. Then next up we have Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill. I think I must have done some book shopping around the time that I finished that video because I found myself buying quite a few of these books. Heart-Shaped Box is about a man that is a collector of macabre items. He's got a cookbook for cannibals, a used hangman's noose, some very disgusting films, and then one day he makes a one-of-a-kind purchase off the internet, a musty suit that arrives at his door in a heart-shaped box that is apparently still inhabited by the spirit of its late owner, and now everywhere he goes the man is there watching and waiting. I haven't actually read this one yet, but I think I'm going to get to it very soon. I read Nosferatu by Joe Hill about a year ago and I absolutely loved that. I found his writing style very fast-paced, and there were an overwhelming amount of comments mentioning how scary this one is, and I'm very fascinated by the aspect of collecting all of these macabre items. Then we have Seed by Ania Ahlborn. Seed is about the father of a family, and he has spent his entire life running from something. But then one night his family get in a horrible accident on the road, and his 6-year-old daughter starts experiencing some things that are a bit too familiar to him, and then she begins to change. So now he has to find a way to stop his family from being destroyed by something demonic. Seed was the very first Ania Ahlborn book that I ever read. I've also read Brother and the Shuddering since then, and I think Seed is my favorite of hers that I've read. Brother is very close behind that. And what I remember of this book is that the ending is absolutely crazy. Next up, we have a couple of Stephen Kings. I feel like there's no way that Stephen King wasn't going to get brought up in a video like this. Multiple of his books were mentioned in the comments, but the ones that came up the most were Pet Semetary and Salem's Lot. I've read 4 or 5 Stephen King books now, and neither of these are ones that I've read. Pet Semetary is about a family that move into a beautiful old house in rural Maine, where everything seems too good to be true, but it turns out the nearby woods is hiding a dark secret, and this family are about to learn about the terrifying power that it holds. This one, just from what I know of it, I can completely understand why this terrifies so many people. From what I can gather of the book and what I've heard other people talk about, I think if you're a parent, this one really hits home, and that's why it is so scary to a lot of people, because it's people's worst fear. And I'll say that without giving spoilers away in case anybody's not heard about the plot of Pet Semetary, but I totally get it. These are in no particular order. I didn't count how many votes each book got. I think if I had done that, Pet Semetary may have been the top contender. There was one comment on the video that mentioned Pet Semetary and it got so many likes, so I genuinely think this one is up there in the top scariest book ever. Then Salem's Lot is about a man returning to his small New England hometown with hopes of casting out his own devils, but when 2 young boys venture into the woods and only one returns, he realizes something sinister is going on in his hometown and it is under siege from some dark forces. I actually know less about Salem's Lot than I do about Pet Semetary. I don't think I've even seen a movie or a TV adaptation of Salem's Lot, and I know there's a few, so I actually kind of want to keep it that way. I know some of the basics of the story, but in terms of specific plot points, I don't know anything, and this one is definitely on my radar to check out in the future. We are about halfway through the books now, so if you're enjoying this video so far, please subscribe. I really appreciate it, and let's get back to the books. Next, we have Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell. Stolen Tongues is about a romantic cabin getaway that doesn't go to plan. A couple are meant to be celebrating their new engagement, but they soon start to hear strange voices and noises coming from outside their cabin. They become completely isolated, and the man discovers that his terrified fiancée is actually whispering back to the voices in her sleep. Hands down, at the time, the prologue to Stolen Tongues was one of the scariest things that I'd ever read. The rest of the book, however, I just didn't like as much, and from what I remember, the ending was a bit disappointing. It got a little bit repetitive, but the prologue, incredible. Then we have Intercepts by TJ Payne. This one is about a dad that's working at a government facility where they do human experiments by putting patients into extreme sensory deprivation. The government did it because they wanted to unlock hidden abilities in the human mind, but unlucky for him, his work has just followed him home. Intercepts is another one that I've read and I really enjoyed this book. The aspect of government experimentation and putting people into sensory deprivation is absolutely terrifying. And with this one, I found similar to Nick Roberts' writing, there were like jump scares that I was not anticipating, but I also did read this one while I was abroad on holiday, so I feel like that did take some of the scariness out of it because I was sat by a pool drinking a cocktail. So that definitely helped put me at ease when I was reading this one. Then we have a bit of a different one, Penpal by Dathan Aubach. In Penpal, a man is investigating his past. There were some strange and horrific events that happened to him in his childhood, and it's only now looking back on these events as an adult that he starts to understand something much darker was going on that has followed him his whole life. I'm pretty sure I mentioned this one in my scariest books that I've ever read video, because the thing about this one that really makes it so scary is that it's grounded in reality. Somebody actually commented about this the other day, and I completely agree that that is what makes this one truly terrifying, is because it could actually happen. So that is something to keep in mind if you're thinking about going into this book, is that it's not paranormal, it's not supernatural. This one is very grounded in reality. And because of that, the ending really messed with me. Then next up we have The Exorcist by Peter William Blattly. In case you didn't know what The Exorcist is about, what starts as noises in the attic, weird smells, furniture moving and cold spots throughout the house leads to terrifying changes in an 11-year-old girl. Medical tests are failing to shed light on any of her symptoms. It's as if she has a completely different personality. And so they start to wonder, is something more sinister at work here? Is it something medical, or is it possible that a demonic possession has taken over her? And is an exorcism the only way to save her? The Exorcist, I can say, is hands down one of the scariest books that I personally have ever read. I read it for the first time last year, and there are scenes in that book that are burned into my brain. The imagery that they conjure was so terrifying, and I genuinely think that the book is way scarier than the movie. I also found the book really interesting. I love religious horror, and there is so much religious discourse in there and talking about gathering evidence, because you need evidence before you can do an exorcism. I thought that was so fascinating, and there was a lot more of the science versus religion debate in there than I thought there was going to be, and it did feel very ahead of its time in regards to talking about Reagan's mental health and whether there's something going on there, and that's what's the cause of her changes in behavior. So yeah, it is absolutely terrifying and fascinating at the same time. Lastly, we have Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. In Incidents Around the House, an 8-year-old girl is being haunted by a malevolent entity that she calls Other Mommy, and every night Other Mommy comes to her and asks if she can go into her heart. The longer this girl Bella is rejecting Other Mommy, the stronger and more terrifying she seems to be becoming, and she's worried that if she doesn't say yes soon, she's going to come after her entire family. Incidents Around the House was absolutely massive when it first came out. It does not surprise me at all that it made this list, because I remember so much talk about it being the most terrifying book that people had ever read. So I had to find out what was so terrifying about this book, and I don't like this one as much. I just couldn't get on board with it. I know some people absolutely love it. There is no denying that Other Mommy is terrifying, but just wasn't for me. I've also read Bird Box by Josh Malerman, and I absolutely loved that book. I would argue that if you're gonna check out a Josh Malerman book, check out Bird Box. In my opinion, that was way creepier, had way more heart, and I also do just kind of love an end of the world scenario where there's like an unknown entity and people have to figure out how to live in this new world. Incidents Around the House, though, was a very fast read. I think because it's written from the perspective of an 8-year-old girl, it's very quick and very easy to get through. I do believe they are making this one into a movie called Other Mommy, and when that comes out, I will definitely check it out because I think it would translate really well into a film. Some honorable mentions of authors that I saw talked about a lot in the comments, but I wanted to just stick to 10 books for this video. I also saw a lot of people talk about Jack Ketchum. I have not read any of their work, so if you've read any of their books, please let me know which one I should check out first in the comments. Adam Neville was mentioned a lot. I listened to the audiobook of The Ritual by Adam Neville, and I didn't really like The Ritual as a book. However, I would 100% recommend checking out the movie adaptation of that, because that is such a strong adaptation of a book. The creature in it is awesome. It's one of the coolest looking things I think I've ever seen, and the pacing of the movie was just so much better in my opinion. Then we have Nick Roberts. I've talked about Nick Roberts on here before. I've read multiple of his books and I love them. We also have James Herbert, Nick Cutter, and Paul Tremblay. People specifically talked about The Troop by Nick Cutter, and I get it. That book makes your skin crawl. And I've not read a single James Herbert or Paul Tremblay book. I really want to read Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay because That one, I believe, is like a reality TV show about a girl that's supposedly possessed, and that one sounds incredible. I love anything that blends reality TV with horror, and it does also remind me of The Exorcist a little bit, and because I loved that one so much, I think I'll really like it. So they are the scariest horror books ever written according to you guys. I'm actually surprised by how many of these I've read. I think I read 6 out of the 10 that were mentioned here, and I promise I picked out the ones that I saw mentioned the most in the comments, not just the ones that I've read. And there's also a really good mix in there of some older books and some more modern ones as well. Also, I wanted to mention books by indie authors, because indie authors have written some of the scariest stuff that I've personally ever read. There were a couple in here that I also talked about in my scariest horror books that I've ever read video. So we are definitely on the same page, and any that I haven't read yet that I mentioned on this list, I'm definitely going to be checking out. I already have Heart-Shaped Box on my shelf like you've seen, so I will be picking that up as soon as possible. If there were any books that I haven't mentioned here that absolutely terrified you, please talk about them in the comments. If you like this video and want more horror recommendations, please subscribe. I really appreciate it. I'll see you in the next video, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Bye!